Growing up, I've always been heavily involved. I was student body president in college and in high school and on every club and things like that. So I've always been one of those just people that wanted to get involved in everything. I think what got me most wanting to make a difference in our community, in the gay community, was the fact that I became HIV positive. So I think that's when it really kind of hit home, and it was like something that I needed to become more of an advocate for than, just kind of, the everyday cause, or, giving money to something at a bar or something like that. It really kind of made it a little bit more prominent in my life. Significant role. It was always fun. It was always more for the fun of it, and it never hit home as much as it did. When I became positive, then I started really looking at what I could do, because the sisters weren't in Las Vegas at that time. So I decided, what could I do? So I really became more involved in AFAN, and I started going to community counseling, and that's where I met some of the other sisters, or some of the other founding members. And I was really young. I had just become positive, and I was trying to wrap my head around it and figure out how I could make it a positive thing in my life. I knew a lot of people that, when I became positive 5 years ago, it was, I don't know, it seemed like it wasn't a death sentence, but it was an excuse for people to live recklessly. And that's not, and that could be the case as well now, I think, in some situations. And I didn't want that to be the case for me. I wanted to live healthy, and I wanted to figure out how to turn it into something healthy. So, I went through my time of, depression for a few days and all that kind of stuff. And then once I got past that, I wanted to figure out how to make a positive, effect out of my life. So I became heavily involved with community counseling, with AFAN, and I started doing the speaking around with the HIV 101, and, I was one of the speakers. And I guess it was kind of significant that I was young and that I was newly diagnosed. Most of the time when the newly diagnosed HIV positive kids come around, they're not mature enough, or they're not dealing with it well enough to be able to speak intelligently, or to really give their story in an effective way. And I had already kind of dealt with it, and I had, luckily I had a supportive family, and I had a supportive, kind of friend base that I was able to deal with it, and that's why I decided to start speaking. And that led to Sister Lucy saying, you know what, there's this organization that I want to bring to Las Vegas. I think it would be really fun. Myself, I had never done any kind of dressing up like this. I'd never done anything, along these lines before. So to me, it was definitely something that was out of my comfort level and very radical. For me, it really came down to the fact that I had a passion for wanting to do something different, and what the mission of our house was. The mission of our house to really bring about a change with the HIV and AIDS community, and really kind of raise money from a grassroots kind of effort. That's something that really spoke to me. And I said, I would love to be part of something like that. And it seemed like something that I could really have a passion for. And that's where I kind of went with it. And that's, so my activism and my, my passion for it all kind of came out of that. And I think really kind of came out of, some of my own struggles that I was dealing with. I found out I was positive on a Thursday. And I called out of work that weekend because I needed time to regroup. And that time I had this mission to tell all my friends and family about myself, which was good and bad in some ways. But I needed some outlet. I needed something to get this out of myself, because I knew that that wasn't going to be enough. So I, over the weekend, I researched what kind of counseling I could do, because I didn't necessarily want to go to counseling on my own. I felt like I needed to talk to other people, but I really didn't know a lot of other positive people. So I found community counseling. The only night that I was able to go was on the long-term night. The people that had it, long-term instead of the short-term, which I should have been going to the short-term one. But I didn't know, and it really wasn't clear online or anything. So I showed up, I believe it was a Tuesday night, and I showed up, and it was all the old-timers that had had it for years. And I come strolling in, and I'm new to it, and it was kind of a culture shock. And I think it was good for them, and it was good for me. Different people that had been living with it for 20 years, and they were still healthy in my eyes. I didn't think that speaking to big groups of people about my story, about how I was infected, was going to mean so much to me, but it did. I actually had first I had opportunities that I opened up in ways to them that I hadn't even opened up to my partner or to my family. You know, for instance, the person that infected me, because I'm not very, I know exactly who gave it to me. And I had to realize quickly that I couldn't hate that person, even though that person didn't disclose it to me. I didn't ask either. And it was a heat of the moment. We didn't wear a condom, and what happened happened. And I take just as much, responsibility in that. It would have been nice if he had told me, I think that he did have a certain amount of responsibility, but I needed to not hold that kind of hatred in my soul. So I didn't know necessarily that he knew, and when I saw him, because he doesn't live here, when I saw him online one day, it happened to be the morning of a speaking engagement that I was going to be doing that night. And I remember talking to him and asking him, hey, I just have a question. Do you know that you're positive? Because I found out I'm positive, and you may want to go. And his reply was, yeah, I know. I've known. And he was very kind of open about it. And I said, why didn't you tell me? And, I was kind of upset, but I was dealing with it now. And I had already accepted the fact that, I was just as much to blame before I ever had that conversation. And, his reply to me was, you should have asked me. And, it's unfortunate that, we didn't have that conversation ahead of time. And, we got into it and we got hot and heavy and didn't think to tell you. And I was like, okay. So I had to go to that speaking engagement that night with that information, and I hadn't even shared it with my partner or anybody. And I remember going to it, and there was a group of nurses. So it was a bunch of women that were almost the same age as my mother. And the leader of it, the teacher of that class, was a man, and he was a straight man, and he was great, so supportive and everything. And I gave the speech. I kind of gave the same story, because that was what was nice about my story. Is my story was evolving. Every single time I gave my speech, it was something new, a new aspect, because I was dealing with a new emotion. My story was, always evolving. So I had new things to give to it every single time. And when I told them that, it was what I needed. The reaction that they gave me was, they were shocked. I remember the professor or the teacher of the class, he couldn't believe that, I was that calm about it, and he said I would have killed the person. And, he had a very strong reaction, and I needed that. I needed to know, that kind of validated my feelings, you know what I mean? And it was nice to have somebody, a bunch of strangers, care about me and, care about my story, and it was nice, you know what I mean? And, it was nice to know that I could give that, and I could be very open and give them another face to what this all was, because I know for me, walking in, I represented their sons, or I represented, a family friend, a young family friend of theirs. And it was nice, because I think they saw a different side to it. They didn't see, somebody who was, completely out there. I'm not a big partier. I'm not at the clubs a lot. That's just not me. So for me, my story was a little bit different, and, it was nice, and they kind of were along that journey with me. So after doing some of the speeches, then Lucy came up with the idea, because he had met some of the sisters at I think it was an AIDS walk, and visiting some of the other cities like LA and San Francisco, and that's where he said, I think that you'd be a great kind of dimension to this group of people that I'm trying to get together.